Dynamo and Clarendon Partners have come together to provide an educational series around best practices and successful strategies to follow throughout your post implementation journey with FinTech. Clarendon Partners is a boutique woman owned consultancy that helps you engineer your organization's DNA to prepare for a more efficient, brighter, and agile future. We're pleased to welcome you today to the first session of this three-part series, Your Implementation Journey, the Operating Model and New Tech Fit. In this first segment, Rob Fox, Senior Manager at Clarendon Partners, will share how to best prepare your team for change. Rob will be followed by Mike Parrinello, who serves as Director also at Clarendon, and he will give us a bit of a reality check on the new hybrid world you will face moving from old versus new. Finally, Michelle O'Connell, Dynamo's Global Head of Implementations, will provide guidance around how to best prepare for your post-implementation environment. Now let's get started. Rob is going to kick things off for us. Rob, what changes should teams be prepared for beyond standard configuration and user testing?
One of the key things that teams should prepare for beyond the standard configuration user testing that goes along with any systems implementation is the full future state business model and really upstream and downstream processes around that. So that would be considering things like what's the end-to-end workflow, how does data flow in and out, how do any operational processes change, inputs or outputs from the operations teams once the new system is live. So a great way to work through these is to really consider a day in the life of the operations team's users that they'll be using the new system, just to ensure that the broader aspects are well accounted for post go live beyond screens and how they work. You have the full business operations inclusive of the system documented and understood well in advance of go live.
Let's head over to get Mike's view on a few things. Mike, when a client enters the hybrid stage of implementation, which is essentially old versus new systems in place, what are some of the red flags they should be aware of?
So going into a hybrid scenario where a client may be using the legacy system for some functionality or asset classes or reporting, and using the new system for others, or if it's a phased rollout, the way to avoid that users would create red flags, and the ultimate red flag would be they're using the system for the wrong thing. They're not aware of what to use the new system for. And because of that, they create business problems. So how to avoid that? As an implementation team, it's the implementation team's job to explain the logic. The implementation team likely spends a lot more time focusing on these sorts of rollout and tactical things than the business users do. So creating documentation and cheat sheets and things like placemats so that they know, okay, use system A for reporting, use system B for new transaction entry. Those kind of things can be incredibly helpful. And then following that up with consistent communication about the proper use of both the legacy and new systems.
And Mike, what are some of the things that clients should think about as they approach year end between old versus new systems?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. So moving into a year-end reporting cycle, depending on the time of the rollout and truly whether you're dealing with an accounting system implementation or not, there is likely going to be some complexity about delivering the year-end reporting if you've transitioned at some point other than year-end. So what does that mean? Basically, the first segment of the year, you're probably going to be pulling data out of the legacy system. And later in the year, you're going to be pulling data out of the new system. So that creates some complexity from a number of standpoints. Making sure that people know their roles in the reporting cycle. You may have different people working in the legacy system versus the new system. So there could be different roles and responsibilities in terms of pulling that data. And then doing a lot of planning in advance on I'll call it the production cycle. So if you're dealing with pulling data from two systems, there's probably a very manual process at the end of that to create a format that business stakeholders and management are going to be comfortable vetting that format, and almost doing a walkthrough and a creation of a mock report cycle so that people know, okay, person A is going to pull system data from this system, person B is going to pull it from the new system, and person C is the one that's going to populate that data into the reporting template that we're going to end up using as a one-time thing on the combined data set.
We're now going to have Michelle weigh in about preparing for change between systems. Michelle, what do clients need to think about in terms of reporting or end user adoption in general?
So, as the head of implementations at Dynamo, I'm often asked the question during a conversation with a prospect about what does the project team composition look like on their side? How many people do they need? What roles should they be in? And this is certainly a key decision to make to ensure the success of your implementation. It's really important. The instinct is often to try to pick the most senior people possible and put them on the project team. But the challenge is that while their guidance is critical in terms of decision making and understanding requirements, often their days are filled with day to day responsibilities. And it's very difficult to get enough focus from those senior leaders during the project work. So it's really important to think about a concept of using tactical resources who can have some time allocated in their day to focus on the project, but then can go to those senior leaders and make sure that they are engaged in any key decisions, any key challenges, and things like that. Certainly, any business unit that will be using the system should have some kind of representation on the project team. Typically, I would recommend someone from with a little bit more of a technical inclination as well. Not that they're needing to have specific engineering skills or coding skills, but just someone who's comfortable navigating around something like an admin module and might understand a bit about making configuration changes and tends to be comfortable adopting new technology and navigating around new technology. It's really important to be honest when thinking about your project timelines and realistic. Oftentimes, clients can be a little bit optimistic and thinking about putting a system in a matter of weeks and not months. And they often don't necessarily think about what are the normal operations in their business that might come up during that project timeline that might pull people away from the project work. Those are normal, those are expected. And it's best just to be conservative and expect some of those unknowns to pop up and incorporate that into your project planning and project timeline planning. Certainly, the goal of every implementation is to make sure that we are set up for adoption, which means that we want the users who are licensed to be able to use the system well and feel comfortable using it when the project wraps up. And it's often an easy way to help achieve that is to make sure that those teams are incorporated in the project team in some way, that they're aware of the system, they're aware of the decisions, they're on board, they're engaged, and they're ready to go. Certainly it's always a bit tricky thinking about scaling, right? So there's maybe some smaller firms that might have a handful of employees all the way to very large firms with multiple global teams. So certainly it's a little bit different in each organization given the size of their team and the size of their project teams. But certainly, again, the key stakeholders should be represented. There should be a team of people who have the time and the bandwidth to be engaged in the project work and have the ability to get kind of the ear of the more senior decision makers when needed. We sometimes like to use a steering committee approach to make sure that those more senior resources are engaged. So perhaps we meet monthly with them, prepare a very efficient executive summary of the project status, any key challenges, obstacles, decisions to ratify, and make sure that we can meet quickly with them in 20 or 30 minutes, send the materials a day in advance so they have a chance to review them, and just kind of tee up any key discussion topics for those steering meetings. And that's a great way to make sure that those senior stakeholders are engaged as well. One concept that I've heard about from the team at Clarendon, which I think is tremendously useful, is the concept of force amplification. And this really means figuring out who within your organization are those really key SMEs, decision makers. They know the business. Often those people's time is the most difficult to get because their calendars are quite full. So perhaps you might pull someone from their team onto the project team, but make sure that they have that direct path to that senior stakeholder to make sure that every decision we're making, requirements are aligned with their expectations.
Thank you to our speakers, Rob, Mike, and Michelle, and to Clarendon Partners for collaborating with Dynamo on this really important first series. Stay tuned as Series 2 will focus on the final countdown. Ready, set, launch. But wait,